Hey everybody, this is Perch. My guess is that the title of this video is going to confuse people, and it's not going to be what you think from this whole thing. But let's read this mail. The mail says the difference in men and boys. Perch, hope this email finds you doing well. In One Piece Z movie, there's a scene where the Marines are watching a presentation. There's a shot that shows how their meeting room has space for giants, human-sized Marines, and everyone in between. That scene has stuck with me ever since, because my thought at the time was, this is their Justice League. Now, obviously, the Marines aren't the Justice League, but the way that Oda-sensei is able to create super teams of characters of such varying origins, sizes, and biologies feels very much like what I hold dear about Abnett Landing's Guardians of the Galaxy and David Nguyen's Young Justice. Do you think there's some common trait among these creators when it comes to building teams that are made up of characters who may as well be from different genres? Is it a rejection of something like object affordance that lets them see how characters can work in ways others who accept the traditional view would miss? Thanks for your time. Stay safe from Arby's. First off, I think if you're a good writer, then formulating a good team is very much, part of your repertoire or kind of what you do very well. And a good team book generally needs to take a bunch of different dynamics and harmonize them in a way that, two goals. Number one, that nobody gets lost in the shuffle. It's not a team if you have one dominant character in the book and then everybody else just kind of wandering around the sidelines. Everyone needs to have their moment to shine. And so that's why, like the jokes of the Justice League where you'd have Aquaman there and it's like, what's he going to do if the Justice League is, fighting an enemy that's not near water? There's nothing for him to do. It's always one of the struggles with Aquaman. That's why Aquaman got the "you're useless" kind of, moniker around him, was for that reason. And, what Oda has done, if you look at the Marines or you look at the One Piece crew, for example, and you've got, Luffy versus Nami versus Robin versus Sanji versus Zoro, you've got a bunch of different traits that have been brought together that basically affords everybody a chance to shine, except maybe Brooke, because fuck that guy. No, I'm joking. But the goal is to create different power sets, different personalities, different moments that create an overall, the sum is greater than its parts mentality. And that gets to the second part, which is you want areas where characters who are different, kind of like the Odd Couple type of behavior, to be able to work off each other in new and unique ways that brings out something different in the character than if they were just solo. So an example of that might be the relationship that Chris Claremont struck between Nightcrawler and Wolverine, where two very different personalities, two very clearly different ideologies and what they do, and yet, the two worked together, got together, had a kind of a fun back and forth between the two of them that was unique and good. It brought out a different side of Wolverine, at times a different side of Nightcrawler. And so that's kind of the dynamic of when you're creating a good team. This is something that, I'd say a lot of good comic writers do very well. And many of you will hate this analogy, but, when Brian Michael Bendis was showing off a little bit in the first issue of Mighty Avengers. If you go back and you read that comic, part of that comic is the assembly of a team. In that instance, Bendis is kind of doing the writer speaking through the character's voice, where you have in this case, Tony Stark and Carol Danvers kind of debating what should be on a team and what are the right elements to make up a perfect team and how do you kind of structure them together. That was that was basically the first issue of the book, was a lot of this. And then we'd see little clips of how their planning worked out. But that's kind of what goes on in a writer's head when they're thinking about that perfect team. Now, it's worth saying that a lot of people fail in this because they don't create the perfect team. Instead, they fall into the trap of, hey, Deadpool is popular, we need to get Deadpool into it. Or even worse, we've got to have three women, we've got to have three men, one must be disabled, one needs to be gay, one needs to be black, one needs to be Mexican. Like assembling a good team cannot be a checklist of traits. And this will, by the way, potentially make a lot of you crazy. I don't know. But the idea of race in a comic book, unless you're authentically writing the race into a character, unless it's part of their history, like Misty Knight and Storm should be very, very different characters because both have very, very different backgrounds. They're both black, but that is kind of the least interesting part of who the characters are. It's their background, it's their upbringing, and I think a lot of comic books blow this. And so I was seeing some articles recently about assembling a team, and it's like, well, we need to make sure the team is diverse. The team has, a strong woman, and the team has another strong woman. I'm joking, but basically that, they start making a team off of skin traits, and the challenge with that is, in a comic book, it's artwork. They're really, unless you invest in the character's personality and background, the skin trait is just, RGB coloring on a page. It actually has no meaning. This is, I don't know, this would be a good video all to itself where I struggle to land my point. But it's like, if you take a Mexican character and you draw them on the comic and you give them no background, no personality, but you color them Mexican, are they Mexican? I would argue they're not. All you've done is you've applied a color or a filter to a drawing. You haven't actually made anyone the diversity that you claim. And I think that's where, you see a lot of comic books where the writers are actually investing into the culture of the character to make it truly diverse or truly unique. And you see others, that are basically just phoning it in or saying we need to have this amount of this type of character, and there's no thought to the actual personality, and so you get nothing. You get stereotypes. I think, by the way, this is one of the big problems that comic books has today when writing gay characters is the writers really don't have a good sense of how to make an actual well-formed character. And so you get a, quote-unquote gay character that uses kind of the worst stereotypes from, an NBC's Will and Grace from years ago, and that's the full extent of their personality. And that's why when you see comic books where the characters have to tell you constantly who they are, it means the writer has failed to actually bring that out in the character themselves. Midnighter and Apollo do not have panels and panels and panels and panels about them talking about that they're gay. They don't need that's baked into the personality of the character themselves. It's inherent to who they are. They don't need to tell you because you know it just by reading the comic. And so I notice this a lot in like a lot of the Pride anthologies, or actually the ones that do it the worst are the Marvel's Voices, like Latino version, where they really have to bend over backwards to be like, I am Latino, I am eating an empanada, that makes me Latino. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? That is not the sole extent of the culture. So anyway, I got way astray of the team, but it all fits. A good team book, and somebody who's truly a master at writing and separating the men from the boys, if you will, is somebody who really takes these different personalities and fully founds them and creates a book where these different personalities and traits and characters bounce off each other. One of the reasons why The Authority worked quite well as a comic, even though you had multiple different writers. You had Mark Millar, you had Warren Ellis, you had, who else did you have in there? You had, I'm forgetting somebody major in this. Shoot, I can't remember. Grant Morrison, right? I think Grant Morrison did a run at this. Anyway, you had some big time writers write on this stuff, but if you notice, The Authority as a book was, the characters were fully formed. They were fleshed out. They had depth. They went through that whole storyline of the Doctor. And by the way, I'm not holding this up as the most amazing, example of character development of all time. But I do use an example of, you look at Alan Moore's Watchmen, you look at The Authority, if you compare and contrast that to, say, Spider-Man or the Avengers, the Watchmen had 12 issues. Compare that to 1,000 comics featuring Superman. But Alan Moore in 12 issues was able to really define out these characters' personalities and how they changed, and how superpowers altered them and everything else. He basically was able to make these three-dimensional, fully formed characters. And so when they came together as a team, or when there were team-ups, it mattered. It had more depth and more meaning. And so really the great writer knows how to construct a team, but the great writer also knows how to construct a personality. They know how to really make these characters more than just a two-dimensional image on a page, or more than just a handful of surface traits. That's what a good writer is able to do. So, to be a great team book writer, you have to be a good character writer, because at the end of the day, what makes a team work is well-formed characters. And if you don't do that, I mean, by contrast, again, there's lots of examples on the other end. You have that new West Coast Avengers book by Kelly Thompson, and in it you had a combination of long-term characters and newer characters. You had a little bit of both, and but the characters had no real personality to it. They were paper thin. You could have traded the names out for other names and it would have been just fine. This is one of the problems with some of the books of the Krakoa era. They didn't, the characters lost some of their individuality. And when you do that, they no longer function as a team. You look at the different iterations of Uncanny Avengers, and in particular, Rick Remender, I think, did a very good job both in X-Force and in Uncanny Avengers of really giving the different characters very distinct personality traits that were meant to, be bigger and to pay off as, when they're together, even though a lot of these characters were, could, in some cases, had their own solo books, but they had to work as a team. And you look at other iterations of Uncanny Avengers where you didn't have that same care, and it's like, the characters have no meaning. It's why people are often such a stickler around Captain America wouldn't say that, or, Wolverine wouldn't do that, or, Storm would never find herself in that situation. There was some book, it was the Marauders book, so I guess it was Jerry Duggan, right? Or maybe it was the issue, I don't remember. I think it was Jerry Duggan had done that one. And Storm was in there, and one of the aspects of Storm's personality is that she's claustrophobic, and she's claustrophobic for a reason, because there was this trauma when she was a kid, and it's a big deal for her that she's, trapped in this, with this fear. And it makes her an awesome kind of well-rounded character because she has to struggle and deal with this stuff. And so this is, this is core to Storm. And in this, reading again this interview with Marauders, they're like, we really want to get Storm past that fear. We don't want, we need to get past these weaknesses, and that will allow her to be a better team player or a team leader. And the answer is no. There's amazing comics where Storm is a great team leader, and she still had that weakness. She still had that claustrophobia. That's key to actually having a good book, is letting your heroes and your characters have strengths and weaknesses, and it's often those strengths and weaknesses that allow them to bounce off each other. It's all of how it's done. Anyway, there you go. Thank you for the mail. Somebody who can write a good team book and to create that kind of larger than life personality. And I also remember that scene in One Piece where you have kind of these different personas there. It's super powerful. You get somebody who's good at doing that, and it's just worth its weight in gold. And Oda-san's a brilliant writer, so it all fits. Anyway. What do you think? Who are the great team writers out there? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and thanks for listening.